Hi, everybody, and welcome, and thank you for coming tonight to this presentation, public presentation of the Upper Mississippi River International Port District Port Master Plan. We're going to be sharing some information about the Port Master Plan, about what it is, about what it isn't. Some of you may be aware of this project, some of you may not be, so we're going to go kind of from the beginning to the middle to the end. There's going to be a presentation of wake up. There we are. A presentation that I'll give for about 45 minutes of the project, followed by an open mic. We'll ask folks to come up, say whatever's on your mind, react, offer comments, offer guidance, whatever you want to say. We're here for you, and we're here to listen, and that's why we're here. My name is Alan Myers. I'm with a consulting firm called WSP USA. We're a multifunctional architecture, engineer, planning firm. My specialty is port planning and marine facilities, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about tonight. So before we start, just a couple of quick reminders. The restrooms are that way, exits both directions. Please make sure you've signed in. If you haven't signed in, we don't know who's been here, and we really want to keep track. Please feel free to fill out the comment sheets that are at the front table. If you don't get a chance to speak, or if there's something that you want to say but you don't want to stand up and do it, please fill out a comment sheet and leave it for us, and we'll make sure it's part of our file. The presentation right now is being recorded to Zoom. We'll make the Zoom recording with the slides available at www.savannahindustrialpark.org/notices. So you'll be able to download the slides. If you can't see everything on the slides, they're not as big as we'd like, but don't worry, you'll be able to get them, look at them at your leisure. This is the second public information meeting we've had on the UMRIPD Port Master Plan. There's going to be a third meeting we're planning in March to present the final version of the work, and what we hear tonight will help inform how that final version comes together. The Port Master Plan process, I want to emphasize, it's to create an organizational roadmap for the Upper Mississippi International Port District, and I'll explain what they are in a few minutes. But it's an organizational roadmap. It's a general plan for action, but it's not about building anything. It's not a project plan. We're not asking for a go or no go decision on constructing anything, on building anything. It's an organizational strategy that's being developed for the first time by the Port District. Before anything gets built that's mentioned in this plan or contemplated or could logically even grow out of it, there has to be a lot more studies and a lot more work and a lot more opportunity for public comment, for regulatory review, all of that stuff. So what you're going to see is the roadmap that comes before any of that. Finally, we'd just ask, please hold any questions or comments for the open discussion period. Like I said, at 5:45, I got my alarm set to remind us to stop talking and start listening. So I'm gonna try and be disciplined and do that so that there's time to hear from everybody who wants to say something. So tonight we're going to address a few questions. What is the Upper Mississippi River International Port District? What's their mission? Why is it creating a master plan? What's its geography? What does it do? What are its functions? What kind of actions and strategies could it take or should it take to fulfill its legislatively mandated mission, including activities at the Savanna Industrial Park? Who might be affected by those potential actions and strategies, and what are we recommending as next steps in the process? But please note, and this is important, that the Port Master Plan and UMRIPD is completely separate from the Parcel 20 reuse plan that the LRA and the Army are undertaking now. It's completely independent of the BRAC process. If you want to comment on the Parcel 20 process and plan and reuse plan, you certainly can, but any comments that you offer about the Parcel 20 process won't be recorded into that process. This is a completely different meeting for a completely different purpose. If you do want to comment on the Parcel 20 plan, please forward any comments that you have to this email address, svadaeis@tetratech.com. That's the only way that your comments would become part of the record for that project. We have no formal role in that process. This is not a public hearing, and we want to make sure that if you do have a comment, it gets to the right people. So please send it to that address. And for the same reason, we can't really tonight offer you any information or address any questions about Parcel 20 or the reuse plan or BRAC. And there's two reasons for that. One is that the reuse plan is part of a federal process to convey U.S. Army land to the Joe Carroll Depot LRA. And the UMRIPD is not part of that process, completely separate and independent. And as you'll see, the recommendations that we've developed that are under consideration by the Port District don't consider Parcel 20 in any way. There's no planning about Parcel 20. There's no use assumed for Parcel 20. There's no need assumed for Parcel 20. There's no findings about it at all. It's not in our plan. So you'll see a lot of other things that are on our plan, and we welcome your comment about those. So what's the purpose of this plan? Illinois Department of Transportation a few years ago took a really heightened interest in the state's port system and all of their port districts, and they offered planning grants to a number of ports. Upper Mississippi River International Port District took up IDOT on its offer, received a $400,000 grant to do a study, and they contracted in August of 2022 to start a master plan process. And there are really three goals of this master plan process. One is to develop a blueprint and roadmap for organizational action. One is to create materials for internal guidance and regulatory coordination, basically a data bank of information that they could follow up on. And third, to really look at near-term development options and especially near-term revenue generation strategies that could help the Port District kind of get a firmer financial footing to advance its mission. So technical work started in 2023. We analyzed markets and development opportunities. We suspended work due to transitions in UMRIPD board leadership, resumed in earnest under Steve Kiefer, and a draft Port Master Plan has been offered to the board for their review, and it's currently under consideration. What you'll see tonight is draft materials that come directly out of that plan. They have not been adopted, but they have been offered for review. They are under review right now. We've collaborated with our technical advisory committee with 2 meetings. We're going to have a third later this month. We had a public meeting in April to unveil kind of our first concepts. We've worked to refine those since then, and we wanted to share those concepts with you tonight at our second meeting. There'll be a third meeting, as I mentioned, in March to present the final versions. What are the Illinois port districts? Well, there's 20 of them throughout the entire state. These are established by legislature. They started establishing these decades ago. And there's some big ones like Illinois International Port District in Chicago, some smaller ones like Waukegan and Ottawa and Seneca. And they've continued to really develop these port district definitions to this date. They're similar but not identical in their powers and missions. They cover different waterways. They cover Lake Michigan, the Mississippi River, the Illinois River, Kaskaskia River, and the Ohio Rivers, 5 different waterways. Each of these port districts has a different mix of attributes. Some of them are handling a lot of cargo. Some of them are handling, have marinas. Some of them have airports. Some of them have warehouse facilities. Some of them don't have any assets at all. So it's a whole range of different functions. UMRIPD was established as the 17th district out of these 20. It's comprised of Joe Davies and Carroll counties, governed by a board of commissioners. And as part of its establishment in Illinois law, it was given a set of duties and powers. And a lot of words on this slide. I'm going to try and be brief about them, but these are really important because this is what the Port District is charged with doing. It has the duty to develop intermodal harbor and port facilities for public water and land transportation, has the duty to foster, stimulate, and promote the shipment of cargo, has the duty to acquire, construct, own, lease, develop terminals, harbors, wharf facilities, piers, docks, warehouses, terminals. It has the duty to prepare and adopt a comprehensive plan, which it's doing now. It has the duty to study and make recommendations about river resources. In order to fulfill those duties, it has a number of powers. It can issue construction permits. It can act to acquire, own, construct, sell, lease maritime or landside facilities. It can provide utility services. It can apply for grants, funds. It can issue bonds. And legislature specifically and explicitly gave it the power, and this is not a power that any other port district was specifically called out for. specifically calls out the power for the Port District to do this at any former military base within its jurisdictional boundaries, pointing directly at the Savanna Industrial Park and the former Army Depot. So that's a power that is in law, and it's part of the reason why we're looking at the Savanna Industrial Park as part of this plan, pretty significantly. So the resources that the Port District has today, it owns two properties, but it also, which are small, but it also has a $7 million grant that was given to it by the Illinois Department of Transportation as part of the Rebuild Illinois plan. A couple of years ago, legislature made available about $150 million that was allocated among different port districts throughout the state. The UMRIPD's share was $7 million, specifically for the purposes of land acquisition and improvement. So here's what UMRIPD owns today. It's two properties at the Savanna Industrial Park, one off Crim Drive, one off McIntyre Road. Importantly, it doesn't own any waterfront today. Its property holdings stop before the water's edge. So it has two landside properties, fairly small. In the future, UMRIPD is contemplating the purchase of additional properties using that Rebuild Illinois money. And this Port Master Plan is envisioning that they might acquire over 300 acres of Savanna Industrial Park property. Importantly, all of the properties that are targeted in this plan are currently owned by the Joe Carroll Depot LRA. They're not privately owned. They're not federally owned. These are properties that have already conveyed to the depot that are available for purchase or resale that may be acquired by UMRIPD based on future action. But this kind of map is the properties that we're planning for and we're planning around in our Port Master Plan. And it's important that you understand this, that this is the landscape we're working on, and we're working within these blue boundaries here is really our planning envelope. We looked at a number of assets throughout the two-county coverage area for UMRIPD, and there are existing maritime facilities for cargo and passenger activity in the region. One of the biggest ones is Logistics Park Dubuque. You may be familiar with that in East Dubuque. It's privately owned. It's a very diversified terminal. It handles grain, fertilizer, steel, animal feed, project cargo, heavy lift cargo, a lot of different things they do up there, and it's a very diversified, healthy, and vibrant facility. Newt Marine, a marine service provider, is a tenant at Logistics Park Dubuque. Then a little bit further south, number 2 on the map is East Dubuque Nitrogen Fertilizers, then the Galena Boat Ramp and Marina, Marquette Boat Ramp, Newt Marine in downtown Savannah, which is an industrial service, occasional use, Vicerian Grain in downtown Savannah, and then the Savannah Marina. So they're really the 7 major facilities that the Army Corps of Engineers identifies and maps as part of their database. Road and rail access is fairly straightforward. It's US 52, US 20 east and west, Illinois 84 north and south, and a number of connecting roads that get us to farm to port, farm to facility. The railroad system is pretty interesting and complex for just 2 counties. You have Class 1 service from the CP Kansas City, the BNSF, and the CN railroads, and you have Riverport Rail with extensive presence and operation at the Savanna Industrial Park. So served by three major railroads and a very significant local railroad. Important to remember is that the waterfront in the Upper Mississippi River National Port District is largely protected as part of National Wildlife Refuge designation. And active commercial and recreational uses within the refuge areas require a finding of compatibility by regulatory agencies, or a conservation easement provided by regulatory agencies, or a carve out from the boundaries of the National Wildlife Refuge itself. So the 2 major cargo facilities currently operating in UMRIPD actually do have those carve outs. If you look at the maps, this is the first one is Logistics Park Dubuque. You can kind of see their operating area is wrapped around the refuge, but it's exempted from the refuge itself. And then East Dubuque Nitrogen, there's a little carve out where you get right to the water's edge from the facility. So these carve outs have happened, but you can see that most of this waterfront is covered by the National Wildlife Refuge designation, and that's an important regulatory factor to consider in any planning. Freight movement in the district, about 10% of the freight tonnage moving into or out of these two counties was water related. So that's about that's about uh, 500,000 tons in 2019. It's gone up a little bit. It's gone down a little bit since then, but that's still roughly close. Projected to 2050, and this is Illinois Department of Transportation's model data that they purchased from a database called Transearch. It's projected to grow to about 819,000 tons if we don't do anything. So it's growth of about 58, 59%. Just natural market growth is expected that will need to be accommodated by increased capacity at our current facilities. This is a really interesting map, and I hope you can see it because it shows how the cargo mix within the district has evolved over the years. Back in 2013, coal was king. Coal was what we moved a little bit of agricultural product, but it was coal. And as demand for coal and coal-fired power plants dropped, the demand for coal through port facilities dropped, and facilities in UMRIPD started to pick up the slack with other commodities, picking up corn, fertilizers, soybeans. And those have traded places in terms of the bigger or the smaller from year to year. But really, those three continue to be the core of the market for the region: corn, soybeans, and fertilizers. There's some metals, there's some project cargo, which is large and heavy stuff, special shipments. But those three are really the basis of the tonnage that we have seen recently and that we expect to see in the future. Looking ahead to the markets, I mean, grain is always subject to uncertainty, and it's always challenging to forecast it from year to year. It depends on global markets, competition, what's the condition of the river, what's the condition of public policy, what's our trade policy, what kind of demand are we having for alternative fuels, what are we doing in production technologies, what are transportation costs looking like, so those things are always up and down. But the important factor for us in planning is that the region has really seen a significant loss of barge capacity for grain. When you talk about grain movement, you're usually talking about wanting to have a port every 50 miles so that you're capturing 50-mile radius distances for truck moves to and from ports. That 1 hour distance is a sweet spot. That's why you see so many ports on the river for grain, is you want to have them all as close and as accessible to the users as possible to keep the costs down and the efficiencies up. The closure of the facility at Fulton was kind of a blow to a lot of local industries. And we lost capacity for about 40 million bushels of grain moving from truck to barge. Some of that traffic went to Vicerian, some of it went to Bungie and Albany, but a lot of it went off the river entirely. It was just lost. It went to truck, it went to rail, it went to other processes. It didn't go down the river. The Savanna and Albany facilities continue to operate, but their capacity is not unlimited. They're getting a little older, and there's an issue of how do we accommodate growth, and how do we draw back the cargo that we lost with the closure of the Fulton facility back to the water. So the opportunity at UMRIPD, and the big one, is to provide an initial capacity to recapture that proven regional market up to 40 million bushels per year, which would be 1 million tons, maybe 1 tow per week downriver, and moving in the backhaul direction, returning movements of fertilizer for local use. This is a complicated slide, and this will be easier for you to read when you download it and look at it. But the key point here is looking at soy crush markets. In 2017, the Illinois Soybean Association saw that the demand for maybe 5 crushing facilities all throughout Illinois. What happened was Marquis Energy in Hennepin dropped a new facility in that overlaps 3 of those circles. So what that did with them in place is it kind of pushes the demand a little bit further. So we've got Marquis Energy in Hennepin, we've got Cargill in Iowa, and then we've got the location of the UMRIPD at the Savanna Industrial Park, which is right here in a sweet spot that neither of those 2 market areas is serving. So a soy crush facility, if it located at the Savanna Industrial Park, would be drawing from northwestern Illinois, southwestern Wisconsin, eastern Iowa, and in a place that it's harder for other facilities to serve. So we think that that's a significant opportunity worth considering as well. Natural gas is a possibility for us, and there's interest and need for natural gas services. Right now, we don't have pipelines serving the Savanna Industrial Park, although there are some serving the UMRIPD region. There might be an opportunity to expand the pipeline system or even receive natural gas by barge. There's some possibility of sand, bulk materials, aggregates as may arise in the future. But the core of the markets are really going to be grain, fertilizer, natural gas as kind of the basis of our planning. So I'm going to ask you to think about these as I talk through them and be interested in your comments on them. These are draft recommendations from the Port Master Plan, and they cluster into a couple of areas. And the first area is partnership. Part of UMRIPD's mission is to be a steward of waterborne activity and a promoter of waterborne activity throughout both counties, throughout all of the counties, waterfront extent, and covering both public and private facilities. So one of the first recommendations is establish collaborative relationships with private terminals and public agencies in the district, stand ready to provide support services that promote UMRIPD's mission, including planning coordination, facilitating landside access improvements, government agency reviews and approvals, sponsoring grant applications, helping with the issuance of revenue bonds for eligible uses. All of those general promotion activities that people are doing individually, the Port District could serve as a clearinghouse to bring all those together as a way to promote its mission. The second is an opportunity that we see for UMRPD to partner and collaborate with the City of Savanna, the Savanna Park District, to investigate plan improvements to the Savanna Marina city-owned waterfront properties as that waterfront evolves in downtown Savannah. The third area is filling a kind of a functional gap in river operations. There are very few fleeting locations for barges between East Dubuque and Cibola. There's just not a lot of places to tie up barges, to work them, to store empties, to fleet them, and to fill a geographic gap in the river services and support future port operations at the Savanna Industrial Park. We'd recommended that UMRIPD submit a permit pre-application to establish barge fleeting activity at the head of Apple River Island, adjacent to the channel. And then after approval, work to advance development of this facility. I hope you can see this on the map, and again, if not, you'll be able to look at it more when you download the drawings. But you can see that it's two sets of 9 barges berthed with 2 mooring dolphins each outside of the edge of Apple River Island. It's outside of the main channel, so it's not encroaching in the main channel. There's no interference with navigation in the channel that we'd expect. There's no use of land. It's just four mooring structures in the water. We've checked the bathymetry, and the bathymetry is solid. There's no dredging needed here. We did a mussel study and found no mussels at this location. So this has every indication of being a good site for fleeting. In the property side, UMRPD should look at promoting and continuing its program of strategic property acquisitions from the Joe Carroll Depot LRA and advance as soon as possible into turning that property into revenue generation through leasing opportunities, through use agreements, turning that ownership into a revenue stream to fund their operations. They should also at the same time look at opportunities to work with their existing leaseholds and their existing properties, which are already under their control. And then third, work to establish a utility district covering water, wastewater, stormwater, road systems and services at the Savanna Industrial Park, and also future gas service at the Savanna Industrial Park. UMRIPD has been partnering with the Joe Carroll Depot LRA in working with advanced energy, biofuel production, biofuel distribution. We see that as a really good opportunity for the Port District. And it's interesting that establishing a utility district is one of the powers that legislature gave the Port District, because they can do things in their role and with their powers that other agencies can't do to make sure that utilities are funded and sustainable. So we're recommending that work advance in that area as well. As soon as practical, UMRIPD should really work to generate sustainable, predictable, reliable revenue streams from its properties and activities. We'd love to see a target of around $250,000 a year because that funds a dedicated executive director, a dedicated finance director, marketing and outreach, upkeep and maintenance. It keeps the lights on, the office is going. And if UMRIPD is going to advance into some more aggressive and more challenging and more involved planning for a port facility, it's going to need dedicated staff and it's going to need a lot of activity and a lot of attention, to supplement the resources that it has right now. So we're recommending that as an organizational plan. This is a big one. We are recommending that port development be advanced at the Savanna Industrial Park. That UMRIPD should continue to advance engineering, environmental, and financial studies, but to do it for a conveyor and pipeline only port. This is a very limited kind of port, and it was designed specifically and planned specifically to have the least impact on the properties at the Savanna Industrial Park. If you have a lift-on, lift-off port with cranes and you have to come dockside barges, you need to get there's only a couple of places you can do that at the Savanna Industrial Park. A conveyor and pipeline port can be done in a lot of different places. You can do barge berthing in some locations that have a lot less impact. And I'm going to show you some pictures and diagrams that we've developed of different ways we think that could be done. But it's important that we are talking about a conveyor and pipeline port only, and that it would be on properties that are currently owned by UMRIPD or planned for acquisition from the Joe Carroll Depot. The initial focus would be on capturing and serving grain and fertilizer, targeting users and customers that aren't already served by private facilities within the district. The longer term opportunity is to reserve some land for the attraction and hopefully development of a soy crush facility or a comparably sized and comparably job creating agricultural processing facility. Emphasize it's understood many different actions have to occur before any physical development occurs or any approvals occur. Land acquisition, environmental, hydrographic studies, navigation studies, engineering, financial commitments by a lot of different parties, issuance of required permits by a number of responsible public agencies. All that's necessary for development, and we get that, and that's going to take some time. As much as 5 to 10 years it might take. But the starting work and the planning work and the studies need to start now if we're going to see where that leads. So here's a concept that we shared with everybody at the public meeting in April, and it was just a blob diagram at that point. And what we showed was a potential for a soy crush facility in this part of the property, potential for LNG handling, fertilizer and grain handling, grain expansion, even the possibility of some rail activity down at Eastland Grain. But the key feature of this that was unique and different, was to put the barge fleeting on the outside of Apple River Island rather than in Brickhouse Slough. The reason for that is to avoid environmental disruption within the slough itself. What that meant was we had to put the berths here and the cargo here a long way away. But if you have a conveyor and pipeline only system, you can do that. You can make that work. It's expensive, as you'll see, and it's challenging engineering, but it's technically feasible. So that concept, stayed in our heads. And what we did was we started to mine the data necessary to really develop a plan. So we looked at the truck and rail access. We looked at the river channel access, particularly all of these little blue lines, which are river navigation structures. They're wing dams designed to keep the river flowing in its designated channel, to keep it scouring. They're on the east side of the river, north of Apple River Island. Then they go to the west side to push the river back against the island. There's a revetment structure along the island to keep the island from washing away. And there's also a closing dam inside Brickhouse Slough to catch water that might be coming down here and bounce it back out into the channel. So that creates a really interesting navigation condition. And we looked at the frontage of Apple River Island for what might be involved in constructing something there. This is how the bathymetry shakes out in the main channel and against the island. And it's again, the numbers might be a little hard to read, but white is bad and dark is good. And what you see here is a lot of dark. The water depths in the channel and adjacent to the island are really good. Anything you built along the island here would require very little dredging. That also goes for the backside of the island at the bottom here, where there's a little bit of a shallow here that would require dredging if you wanted to get behind the island, but then you get into fairly deep water fairly quickly. So the bathymetry all looks pretty good for the idea of berthing outside of Apple River Island. And so this is going to be recorded, so you can download the whole thing, including the speech. So you don't need to take pictures of everything, but you're welcome to. But it'll be better resolution, I hope, when you download it. The wetlands and floodplains, we mapped those, and there are not really any issues that are outside of Apple River Island. There are issues as you get into other areas of the Savanna Industrial Park. Here's our first port concept. So it has two fleeting areas for barges, one at the south end of Apple River Island. And I don't know if you can see that because my little black box is in the way. So one area for barge fleeting at the south end of the island, one at the north end of the island, two to three barge berths, 1,000 feet dock at the outside of the island here, and a long conveyor system going into the core of the cargo area that UMRIPD would be acquiring from the Joe Carroll Depot LRA. That would serve grain, fertilizer, liquid natural gas, and reserve the potential for a soy crush facility. The other concept is real similar, and okay, wake up, there it is, except that it moves the barge fleeting further south. So instead of being up here in the center of the island, it moves it down here. The conveyor distance is a little bit shorter. You come into the Savanna Industrial Park at a different location compared to that. Otherwise, the same concept, serving the same markets, providing the same service. So you'll see what's not on this map. Parcel 20 is not in this map. Properties that are not owned by Joe Carroll LRA or UMRIPD, not on this map. Everything is currently owned by either UMRIPD or the depot. So we looked at evaluating this concept in a lot of different dimensions, and we tried to take a really fair and critical look at what we'd come up with. For cargo handling, the idea is that UMRIPD would provide marine structures, the conveyors, pipelines, road access utilities, shovel-ready sites. Commercial tenants would come in and build the storage facilities, provide the on-site equipment, provide the other improvements necessary to operate terminals. So it would be a partnership with UMRIPD providing the basic infrastructure and then leasing the land, long-term lease to commercial tenants who would put in their own funds to support business. Both of these alternatives are going to support about 1 million tons of grain per year, up to 1 million tons of fertilizer a year. Again, that'd be about one barge tow per week. LNG is going to depend on the capacity of upland storage, but we've got a lot of room to put a lot of storage if we needed it. No capability for lift on, roll off cargo. It's all conveyor and pipeline. The fleeting in both of these alternatives is outside the channel boundaries. We don't think it'll impact any river navigation. It won't impact any river control structures. The option one barge dock is outside of the channel. It's outside of the navigation area entirely, and it impacts no river control structures. Option two is barge dock is within the channel, and it would impact both navigation as it exists today and probably control structures that are on the other side of the river. So that's a problem for option number two that we discovered as we were laying it out compared to option one. Importantly, little to no dredging needed for either of these alternatives, again, because the deep water exists. From an environmental side, the fleeting activities would require 8 in-water piles. Both of these locations have few to no mussel impacts. So they've been surveyed, they've been looked at, and those are good sites. The barge dock itself would be a pile-supported 1,000-foot by 100-foot platform. The first option is located in an established mussel colony, which is an issue. The option two barge dock location is in the main channel, so we didn't survey it for mussels because it's in the main channel. There would be structural footings for the conveyor system. And this is important. There would be a lot of structural footings on Apple River Island and even one in Brickhouse Slough under both alternatives. So we've got to hold these conveyors up as they span long distances. Also important to understand, we need overhead easements through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service owned or managed lands in the National Wildlife Refuge. Private property impacts are pretty modest. On the upland side, as we get to land, the conveyor right away would run within the road right away of Joe Carroll Depot's LRA's roads along CN Road. So there wouldn't be any private property needed for either for port construction or for the actual conveyance of cargo, other than the overhead easement through Fish and Wildlife. Option number two, as we get to implementation, we looked at the navigation question. We just couldn't get past it, and the idea of doing that much impact to current navigation and potentially navigation structures, that just kind of ruled it out in our minds. We thought that's probably not something that we'd really care to run down in any more detail. But option one, it doesn't have those issues. It does require addressing mussels. We're aware of that. It does require addressing National Wildlife Refuge compatible use or carve out, navigation and hydrology, additional studies. All of those things need to be done. Permitting, cost, funding, public benefits are also going to be key considerations, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those in a few minutes. There is, and coming out of the discussion of these two alternatives among our team, we came up with another variation that we shared with in the plan for consideration. The whole idea of option one was to avoid environmental activity and in the sensitive activity potentially in Brickhouse Slough. We want to get out of Brickhouse Slough, but it creates other effects. And a possible variation that we looked at would keep all of the upland features of option one, but move the barge dock inside Brickhouse Slough below the closing dam. Different mix of pros and cons, but we wanted to share this with you as well, so that you can see what we're thinking. So in this concept, what you do is put the barge dock downriver from the closing dam, so there'd be no impact to the closing dam. This is actually in really pretty deep water on the downriver side of the closing dam. The approach to that area is through fairly deep water, except for this little area at the south end of Apple River Island. What you need to do is dredge a section that links the two deep parts of Brickhouse Slough to connect them together. But in doing so, what you could do is avoid all of the shallows at the Apple River Island, Apple River outfall, and along the SIP boundary. So you'd be limiting the dredging to just linking these existing two deep areas. You wouldn't be impacting the navigation channel or navigation structures. And importantly, you wouldn't need any conveyor footings or conveyors long distances spanning Apple River Island and nothing in Brickhouse Slough itself. It would be a really short run from compared to the alternative from barge to land. There's prior mussel study for this barge location. It needs to be updated, and we're aware of that as a concern. But the trade-off here is we're operating in Brickhouse Slough, but at potentially far less other kinds of impacts to fish and wildlife areas. So we offer it for consideration. In terms of implementing these concepts, for marine permitting, we've identified 14 different investigations, permit approvals needed to advance the barge fleeting and barge dock. That would be Corps of Engineers, Fish and Wildlife, Illinois EPA, Illinois Department of Natural Resources, Illinois Emergency Management Agency, and that would be probably between 18 and 33 months for these permit investigations. On the land side, 13 additional investigations, Corps, Fish and Wildlife, Illinois EPA, DNR, emergency management, and county approvals, probably about 12 to 24 months. So a lot of different studies and a lot of different investigations we know would go into this. From an access side, landside access, we looked at the truck access and the roads. We think the road capacity is going to be adequate for the kind of growth that you might see. But condition upgrades are needed. You need to look at repaving and striping of McIntyre Road and spot improvements to geometry, pavement, shoulders, general road condition throughout the area. The grain, fertilizer, and energy users that we're expecting are truck to barge. They're not rail users, so we haven't designed anything about rail or looked at use of any rail property or even any rail connections. But a future soy crush facility, could potentially be a big rail user. So we haven't included any rail recommendations, but future rail is possible. That would be based on what the freight railroads and the customers work out in the future. Our design accommodates it. It certainly doesn't preclude it. It just doesn't plan for it now because we don't have that kind of near-term user in mind. Capital costs. We costed this out and it's expensive. It's about $138 million. That includes about a 50% markup, 30% for contingency, 20% for soft costs like engineering, design, permitting, especially, and management services. So with those markups, you're looking at a fairly expensive effort. About 70% of that total cost, including the markup, is for the conveyor system and the support structures. That length of conveyor that we're looking at from getting from the outside of Apple Island to the upland is a significant cost, and most ports don't have to bear that cost. Reducing the conveyor length, reducing the number of port support structures would significantly reduce the cost of this project, and there are other value engineering options that can and should be explored to get the cost down. But that's certainly one area for future study. We looked at the revenue potential that UMRIPD might get from this kind of facility, and we think it's probably about reasonable to target up to $1 million a year from leasing prior to port operation, about 2.5, 2.7 per year from leasing and throughput once the port is operating and handling cargo, possibly up to 4.1 million per year if you were able to get a soy crush facility in place. And that's great. That can support the issuance of revenue bonds, but not enough. You wouldn't cover more than about a third of that $138 million cost probably from revenue bonds. So you need to look at other sources of revenue or reducing the cost. One source of revenue that has funded some activity at Illinois ports is the Rebuild Illinois monies that IDOT put out, but those are really one-time infusions of cash. They're not sustainable funds. Federal grants are a really important opportunity for us. The Hennepin soy crush facility got a $39 million grant from a program called Port Infrastructure Development Program, PIDP, for an operation that's very similar to what we're proposing, except their conveyor is a lot shorter. Otherwise, it's extremely similar. And our project, we've done the modeling. We've looked at what the public benefits would be in terms of reduced truck traffic and reduced truck distance. And we think we'll get very similar benefits and be able to support a grant just that size. And private partnerships are another possibility. So I'm going to whip through some of the rest of these slides in the interest of time. We looked at construction benefits. Construction benefits are big, 517 direct job years and 717, including indirect and induced jobs from the construction activity. That's $138 million in spending. That's a lot of money getting spent. Operations benefits, it's challenging to estimate how many jobs exactly will be at a marine terminal. If you look at the federal data, there are no jobs in marine transportation in Joe Davies or Carroll counties. And of course, we know that's not true because we've got operating terminals. But what's happened is the jobs are logged as part of the business, not as marine transportation. So a different source from a federal source, we looked at Dun & Bradstreet, and they estimate that Logistics Park Dubuque has 17 direct on-terminal jobs. And we said, okay, that's probably a good benchmark for what we're looking at here. Each of those direct jobs creates other jobs, also direct jobs, from truck, barge, warehouse, other kinds of services the terminal uses. So really it ends up being about 50 direct on and off terminal jobs. And then if you include indirect and induced effects, it's about 100 to 150 from marine operations. That's without soy processing. If you add soy processing, that's about 50 more direct on terminal jobs. You probably double the total jobs. The whole SIP could benefit from the port operation, we think, in a couple of ways. It could generate services demand for services that could locate at the SIP, that could take up space, could utilize facilities there. It could attract new businesses to private properties. It might attract some users who require both barge and rail, which is kind of a win-win for both modes. We haven't quantified those effects yet, but they could be significant. So we have a series of recommendations. I won't talk about these, except this is just a list of everything I've talked about. The two I want to talk about at the bottom here are really the ones that I hadn't mentioned. And one is to maintain awareness on possible Parcel 20 development. This plan is not about Parcel 20, but the Port District's mission is to be aware of and involved in and know what's going on in the port world. So watching for possible development and advancement of planning on Parcel 20 is part of the mission. Maintain awareness is the key there. It's not an active role, but it's staying aware of what's going on. And then the other opportunity is to look at land banking, maybe the possibility to acquire lands, exchange them for other lands, federal or other ownerships that could be valuable in developing a port. Our next steps to integrate public input and feedback, get input from our technical advisory committee, have review by our board of commissioners, and to finalize our master plan and present it to the public. We're going to have move into the open discussion. If anybody joined late, please make sure you're signed in. And again, the recorded version of this presentation and the slides are going to be made available to you for downloading after the meeting. When we go into open discussion, I'd ask that you step up to the microphone and speak so that everybody can hear you. And maybe if we're lucky, the recording will also hear you. Take turns and be brief so everybody who wants to speak can. We want to focus on prioritizing hearing from community members and key stakeholders. So they're the ones who hopefully will speak first. Ask or say anything you want. We'll respond if we can. And just to close, we're kind of brainstorming. If we were sitting in the audience in your shoes and we just heard this presentation, what are some questions we would ask? So we've listed these. Why is the port doing this plan? Why do we need another port? Is it good to have marine cargo terminals in a national wildlife refuge? What studies and approvals do you need? And so on. So anything you want to ask, please do. I'm going to come over and turn on the mic and go from there.